Hutch, I do want you to deal with the Trump example. Either refute it or say yes, but that's Trump.
Well, it's West Virginia. It's West Virginia. So can I step in? I want to say
no. You. Hang on. Let Hutch respond.
Why
to that.
are you flip-flopping when you were agreeing with me when we had the same conversation?
Oh, bro,
you're flip-flopping because your Vanguard boys are on the podcast.
Man, I'm about to listen. I'm about to roundhouse kick Pisco. He already has the beard off. I'm gonna take the mustache off the next time I see him.
So they were debating on Biden v. Trump when it comes to what Biden could have done to be more forceful and help going into the 2024 election versus the differences between Biden's first days in office and their first days in office. They clash a little bit. I wanted to check it out, just see what the tenor of the conversation is, because I don't really watch a lot of live and learn content. I don't really end up listening too much to those guys. And that's not because, you know, there's nothing of value to be heard over there. It's just I'm usually so busy. And so if I get a chance, I want to be able to. So let's check it out. They went to head-to-head with the Vanguard, who I haven't talked to. You know, I think I've only been on the Vanguard once. We debated Ukraine. It went as you would have probably expected. And then the last time I think there was any interaction is they posted a reaction to like my Hassan thing a while ago. We haven't interacted forever. I don't know how they're doing. Hope they're doing well. But I don't have any clue. So maybe I'll get an idea today.
Biden's first 6 months more legislatively successful than Trump's, but hasn't Trump surprised you? I know he surprised me. I know he surprised a lot of people on Twitter when we're like, oh, they're not going to be able to get Mike Johnson confirmed as speaker. They're not going to be able to get this continuing resolution passed. They're not going to be able to get the one big beautiful bill done.
You believe that, Jessiah? You really believe that?
And he's
Dylan plays the Piers Morgan debate. You said you played yesterday. I watched it off stream. It's not worth it. It's just Piers Morgan scolding these guys for like 30 minutes. It's not worth it.
They have knocked one W after another. They have defied expectations. When it looked like Trump was down for the count, he squeaked a win.
No,
Who said he was down for the count?
That's not true. Wait, Josiah, that is so not true. Trump has, and this I think goes to Zach's point. He has a force of personality and is able to influence his members of Congress to do shit that, you know, that is against their interest, against their constituents' interest. You look, for example, I know you guys talk about Josh Hawley because I think I saw a video of you guys talking about Josh Hawley. Yeah. Like, you know, Josh Hawley puts a stake in the ground and says, no, on Medicaid, I'm not going to budge, and this is really important. This is really important, and he budges. And so, if you actually, Josiah, and I have to question you, you actually thought they weren't going to be able to get Mike Johnson as speaker? You actually thought they weren't going to be able to pass a continuing resolution? That shit was baked in when they won the election, man, because Trump actually has that force of will.
They got it done the first time. They got it done. They got Mike Johnson confirmed on the first vote.
That's one way to spin it. That how long did that take? That took like how many votes to get that done?
Wait a minute. No.
I think we all had because I think we all had. Maybe there was one. Maybe it was Pisco. I can't remember. I think we all had doubts that he'd be able to get his full cabinet confirmed. I think that. Well,
I had no doubts. No. I said everyone was going to.
Like I said, maybe it was you who.
Maybe it was. I'm going to go back and find out. By the way,
I thought there was going to be a sacrificial lamb. I thought that somebody that was totally crazy. I'm not.
I'm actually going to go back and check Pisco because you came in way too hot.
No. Check it.
No, don't worry. We'll check the tape.
No, I will.
Check the tapes on this. I can't wait to find records of you saying, "Oh yeah, Trump is going to get Mike Johnson confirmed in his first vote. He's going to get all of his cabinets picked. He is going to get the one big beautiful bill passed." I think
Pisco did, bro. I really do.
Absolutely
don't fucking believe. That's okay. 100%. All right.
No,
yeah, cool. I mean, but also, I think to Josiah's point though, there was I think a general expectation that there would probably be more reins on Trump than there'd be less reins on Trump than there have proven to been, I suppose, right? That, you know, he would probably have a little bit more problems getting various things done. And he's also, I think, you know...
Believe that, Econoboi? You believe that?
Yeah. I think
an idiot? Are you sure?
There's also been...
Are you sure?
There's also been a lot of things that Trump has done that I think probably did generally surprise people, like even political commentators. Like, for instance, when it comes to things like just like completely shutting down entire government agencies, right? Like the
Department of Education,
USAID, Department of Education, right? And I think as well, like I think there was a Supreme Court ruling that came out, I think it might have been just today actually, that said essentially, you know, you can substantially cut these agencies or withhold funds in Who Gives a F About Congress, essentially, you know, originalist Supreme Court, quote unquote. Like, you know, I think that that's a pretty surprising thing from most people's perspectives. And, you know, people have to adjust their priors, but, you know, there's something to be said, I think, about Trump's, you know, over performance, I guess, relative to his first term in a number of ways.
But it's a misrepresentation of the truth to suggest that Donald Trump just doesn't have to abide by the checks that, you know, people like Joe Biden did. Like you mentioned the parliamentarian, and I think you're like furthering this narrative that, like, you know, the Republicans get everything they want when they elect Trump, and then we elect Biden, he just throws scraps at us. That's kind of the narrative that you guys push, right?
Yeah, I stand by that. I think that his entire presidency, that's why he was a one-term president. Yeah, usually if you're a really successful president, you get 2 terms. He got 1 term.
Well, let's interrogate that a little bit. Like, do you guys blame the Senate parliamentarian for the $15 an hour minimum wage?
No,
I don't understand how you
Joe
reach
Biden
that
for
conclusion.
failing on one of his primary campaign promises to the American people, and the minimum wage in this country hasn't been raised since George Bush.
Well, what should he have done?
Fired the Senate parliamentarian.
Firing the Senate parliamentarian would have needed a majority in the Senate, and the majority in the Senate was not achievable due to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, both of them against the $15 minimum wage. I mean, okay, think about what you'd be asking them to do. Kyrsten Sinema, she is something, okay? Let me just say, probably going to be difficult to reason with her and get her on board with doing the $15 minimum wage. But if you also need to reject the Senate parliamentarian, fire the Senate parliamentarian to do the $15 minimum wage, that's also something that's against her. She's not going to do that. Go over to Joe Manchin, it's the same thing. You stack 2 things he doesn't like on top of each other. He doesn't want to do it. And without those votes, you don't have the majority that is necessary to fire the Senate parliamentarian. And they didn't want to even do a $15 minimum wage in the first place. So you would have need to found a way to get them to go through with it anyway, as well as accepting the fact that it would normalize and make easier if the Republicans come back into power, them ignoring the Senate parliamentarian and using budget reconciliation to make legislative changes as well. All they would need to do is just keep firing Senate parliamentarian until they got somebody that they liked. If we would just be firing the Senate parliamentarian until we got somebody who would accept that we could do a $15 minimum wage change without a 2/3 majority, or without getting rid of, like, say, the filibuster.
Would that have accomplished?
There would have not been the person standing in the way of that issue. Another one would have cropped up, and I would have advised that he deal with it swiftly.
You still didn't have yes votes from either Sinema or Manchin.
I think you can deal with that if you're the president of the United States. To Pisco's point, he expected every single one of those people to fall to Trump because Donald Trump will exercise power within the Republican Party.
Everybody
He will
did.
ruin you.
Not everybody
He'll make sure
did.
that you never work again. I think that Joe Biden could have done a lot more to put his thumb on the scale to get Joe Manchin.
Get into specifics. How is he going to pressure Joe Manchin?
Go to his district, hold a rally, talk about how this guy right here is standing in the way of you getting a minimum wage. Call it the minimum wage rally. Have 100,000 people show up. Have Bernie Sanders speak at it. Have every single person, have Kamala Harris speak. Bring out Barack Obama if you can't. Have Michelle Obama speak there.
Sorry, what
Get
state did he
AOC on the
serve
stage.
again?
This is how we're going to raise the...
It wasn't a district, it was a state. What state did he serve again?
West Virginia.
And then how did they vote in the last election? Do you know?
Yeah, do you think that they would all vote for a $15 minimum wage? They would. We voted for a $15 minimum wage in my state of Missouri, and guess what? We also voted for Donald Trump, unfortunately. People are heterodox. Same thing happened in Florida, which is a Republican stronghold.
It's a Trump plus 40 state. Whatever leverage you think Joe Biden had in West Virginia, you are deluding yourself. Like, I just want to ask you,
that's because people don't show up to vote in West Virginia. Look at how many people are registered to vote compared to eligibility in West Virginia.
Can you simply accept that sometimes presidents are going to be constrained by the Congress, that it's not just as simple as them wielding the bully pulpit? Are you willing to concede that sometimes presidents don't get the things that they want?
How would we know? He didn't do that. He did not do that. He did not make a single effort. He stayed in his basement and he said,
he negotiated bills that he could get passed, and he didn't waste time fighting for something like firing the Senate parliamentarian that wouldn't have changed the outcome.
Bills to give a right-wing, watered-down infrastructure.
I know West Virginia. I think candidates like the Richard Ojeda style that projects strength and like working class kind of like minor issues, you know, I think it pitches better, but I mean, Joe Manchin really was a special case. The fact that we had that seat in the Senate in the first place, getting another Democratic senator to replace Joe Manchin was I mean, it wasn't an impossibility, but it was near an impossibility. And so that gave Joe Manchin outsized amount of leverage compared to other legislators that you could pressure. You can pressure a senator from Connecticut because whatever senator comes after that person is going to be blue. But in West Virginia, whoever comes after Joe Manchin is almost certainly going to be a Republican unless we radically change the condition on the ground of the political space in West Virginia in a way that isn't just done like that, but is going to take a lot of grassroots investment, time, and money that the Democratic Party just quite frankly has not spent and has not dedicated. And so it's not that I wouldn't be against going to West Virginia, doing these rallies, talking about what a $15 minimum wage would mean for them, which I believe in West Virginia, the $15 minimum wage is supposed to increase to 2028. It's supposed to increase to $15 by 2028, if I remember correctly. I think currently the minimum wage in West Virginia is like $12 an hour. It's actually above the national, the federal minimum wage. If I'm remembering correctly, I might be wrong. Let me Google. Let me Google. West Virginia is phasing in minimum wage increases with a target of $12 per hour by the end of 2025, and then continually increasing 15 per hour by 2028. Oh, well, look at that. Well, that's good. I always thought West Virginia would be one of the hardest to do the minimum wage just due to the job loss there, the standard of living there, the cost of living there, and the differences in cost of living and how much you'd get paid in a job on the ground in West Virginia than in other states like Cali or whatever. But if they've been able to find a way to game that out, that's good. Either way, though, Joe Manchin, you're not going to replace him with another Democrat. I just don't believe it. And the candidates that they were trying to put forward were just not up to snuff. So you would have to pressure Joe Manchin in a way where you could seriously make him think that he could be primaried out of that seat, because he is not going to believe that you would just willingly be like, okay, we'll just let a Republican take the seat. Or he always has the flexibility to go independent, like other legislators like Kyrsten Sinema attempted to do.
Bill, so he could claim
and it's not like West Virginia doesn't have a history of high-profile Democrats flipping parties.
Victory after he rolled over completely. That's what happened.
I also think, as I was talking about earlier in the show, Joe Biden of 10 years ago absolutely would not have taken that bullshit from Joe Manchin. Are you kidding me? Do you know who Joe Biden is as a politician?
For the record.
Do you know who Joe Biden is as a politician? Because if Joe Biden had actually been in, if he had actually been in office when he, are you going to let me finish the point?
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, because I can't focus with that either way. If you actually knew who the politician Joe Biden was from his previous era, he would not have allowed his signature piece of legislation to be embarrassed in the way that it was by the likes of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. He didn't even.
I don't know if I'd call $15 his signature piece of legislation, but he did talk about it. He did talk about it quite a lot.
Thread
campaign trail.
To facilitate a primary against them. As soon as Thomas Massey starts talking shit on Donald Trump, Trump's tweeting about how they've already recruiting candidates to run against him.
And what has Thomas Massey done? What did Thomas Massey just do with Ro Khanna? Thomas Massey just submitted legislation to force the government to release the Epstein files, which is not what Trump wants. So Trump says, we're going to buy ads against you. Thomas Massey says, let's get those Epstein files out, boy. So, there's some people who are going to be more resistant to pressure than others. And Thomas Massey should hypothetically be less resistant to pressure than someone like Joe Manchin, being a red senator in a red state that if there was another election in Kentucky, there is a good chance that a Republican would take their spot. While it's not impossible, I mean, Kentucky does have a Democratic governor, so it is an impossibility, but it's very unlikely. And so when it comes to West Virginia, it's even more unlikely that you're going to get a Democrat in there. So we got to understand that Joe Manchin was in a particularly interesting position as Joe Manchin, and it's not like it would be beneath him to try to do that independent pivot, which honestly might even serve him well in a state like West Virginia.
And with Joe Manchin, it's like, there may be some disagreements with this fine and honorable member of the caucus from West Virginia, and let's go talk about it privately like gentlemen. No, Zach is 100% right. You're the president of the United States. You go to his home state. You embarrass the shit out of him. Even though Biden's not very popular in West Virginia, you know, you at least try. And Bernie Sanders is. And Bernie Sanders is.
Look, it's not that I'm against the president breaking balls. From what I know about Joe Biden, he was much more crass in domestic and like private conversations than he was in like public displays. It's just you would bust the balls of somebody that you can presumably like primary and replace. And what you're betting on is that we're going to be able to get the West Virginia public around a challenger candidate against Joe Manchin and not just push Joe Manchin out of the party and then have a whole other set of legislative goals be undermined by not getting Joe Manchin on board. So, I mean, like, is it possible that you could pressure him into it? Very unlikely, but I guess it's possible. What I think is more likely is you would probably undermine your ability to use that vote in order to get other pieces of legislation through.
Bring out people that are popular. Kentucky has a Democratic governor.
And it's not like, look, I would like it if we could just go bust his balls and that would be like the solution. That'd be an easy solution. We'd all feel better. We get the $15 minimum wage. Hurrah. But, you know, sometimes party politics isn't that simple. And it's, again, if you built up the movement on the ground, that'd be one thing. I'm not even against, like, while Joe Manchin's in office, going to West Virginia and making the case hard. But I just find the idea that you're going to, through making that case, pressure Joe Manchin by publicly being like, shame, 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 when he has the ability to pivot in a way other legislators don't, you're gambling.
Not impossible to reach these people. They're not just like 100% Democrats suck. I hate all Democrats. Like, no, if you actually put it to them in a way that makes sense, these states, which, by the way, within the last 75 years, were all blue states. Yeah, you can convince them to fight for something like minimum wage. You can convince them to, you know, take out their anger on this politician who's single-handedly holding that up. I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy to at least try. And that was another issue with Biden. His whole posture, he just exuded weakness. Trump exudes strength, specifically to his base, less and less with every passing day. I think he's kind of fading in that capacity.
Biden particularly exuded weakness towards the end of his presidency. I mean, that's kind of undeniable. Just the vibe that he gave off. But every time he tried to exude strength, like the response, like I remember that, like, those like red lights behind him during that one speech, and people were treating it as if like Darth Maul had taken over the country.
But for a while, he was a master at getting people in line and on message. He turned the entire party into a reflection of himself. You know what I'm saying? Like, Biden couldn't even pretend to try to do that. And again, it might have been
that Donald Trump did when he was president. What was the first thing he tried to do legislatively?
In which term?
The Obamacare thing.
The first term.
Oh, you mean in the first term?
Yeah.
What primary campaign are the Republicans running against Susan Collins? That's a good question, I think.
He passed a tax incentive for rich, and also to repeal and replace Obamacare. I don't know which one happened first.
The first thing he tried to do was repeal and replace Obamacare. Was he successful?
No, John McCain stood in the way of it, but that was because they had a personal grievance. Okay, do you not remember the whole problem?
Do you think that Donald Trump could have used the bully pulpit to force McCain to vote in the way that he wanted to?
I think that Donald Trump, if he had been a more deaf politician, would have absolutely gotten John McCain to go along with it. And if he hadn't said, I like the ones that don't get captured, and made fun of the man's military record, he would have absolutely.
I mean, Trump in other instances, the interpersonality did, like, Trump made fun of like Ted Cruz's wife. Ted Cruz like phone banked for him. So are we just saying that this was like John McCain's personal honor, or was it like what John McCain said it was, which is that Donald Trump did not have a plan to replace Obamacare, just repeal it, and without a replacement, he didn't feel comfortable voting for it. And so when we say like more adept, I mean like adept politician. Yeah, if he had a plan, but then we wouldn't be talking about Donald Trump. We'd be talking about a totally different politician.
Absolutely gotten it.
Yeah, because the thing about Trump is that he doesn't actually give a fuck about the actual policy. Like, he's never really been someone who cares that much about getting policies passed. It's a cult of personality. If he was a sophisticated politician, yeah, he wouldn't have pissed off John McCain in that sort of way. Not that he totally didn't care about that goal of repealing and replacing Obamacare. I'm not trying to seem like he didn't, but I don't think that he cares as much. That's not really his mission. Whereas Joe Biden should have been politically savvy enough to get those senators in line.
Okay. So I feel like, guys, you are perfectly exemplifying what the Green Lantern theory of politics is. The central premise of it is that neither of you seem to accept that the Congress can be a check on the president. Neither of you seem to accept that sometimes.
When did Joe Biden try to use the bullet
I let you
That's
talk.
what I'm
Hold on.
telling you.
Honestly, sometimes the solution is just you need a mega big majority, and the fact that we got as much done as we did with the slim majority that we did have is honestly wasn't even guaranteed to begin with. And there's a question of expanding the majority. And I would say we need to have a bolder message and a bolder campaign to expand that majority. But then my argument would be that we would see the gains on something like this in West Virginia, if we ever did, like 4, 5, 6 year down the line after making those type of grassroots investments, not within like 6-month pressure campaign because we bought some TV ads. You can't like change the like sentiment like that quickly. I mean, is it impossible? Yes. Yeah, probably.
We advise
Let
that
me
he should
speak.
have.
I was speaking.
I mean, it's just like, it's not as simple as you go to the West Virginians and you just like, I am here to speak on the honor of the working class. And then they're like, oh my God, I never heard about it that way before. I mean, these are people who have been, in many instances, told the same thing again and again and again in their entire lives. Many of them, this has become cultural. Trumpism, MAGAism is cultural now, right? There's music, there's fashion, there's tons of like the waving of the flag. Like he's like a cultural icon, and which he was even before he was president. He was a cultural icon. And it's also deeply tied to the state's history with coal mining and what that means to people's families, and the fact that Trump's a warrior for coal, and he partially has kept that dead industry alive. It's not completely dead, but it's a limping industry, if we're being completely honest. And these are all things that we have to find a way to deal with as Democrats, so that we don't go in there pressure our guy, who's supposed to be ours, but isn't always, Joe Manchin. We then make him look bad. He then either pivots to independent, loses, stays Democrat, is hurt, loses. But either way, pivots this way, pivots that way. He has pivoting room. He has pivoting space. And God, man, it's not that I don't want to bust Joe Manchin's balls. It's just that it's not always that simple.
Okay,
nice to have it here. Okay, like you guys seem to think that there is always going to be a way to force the people in Congress to give you the bills that they want, and the reality is literally every single president has been constrained by their Congress.
Never said
every
that.
single one.
I don't think that. That is not my position. I think that Joe Biden should have tried harder. I think he should have tried harder and used the bully pulpit more to shame the people that were preventing him from delivering on what the American voters voted him into the office to accomplish in the first place. To me, as someone who actually deeply cares about these policies, who cares about the public option that he never actually tried to do once he was in office, who cares about the
I agree with him 100% on that. He should have hit on the public. Biden was not great when it comes to public messaging once he got into the office. He did not. I did want somebody who would, if you're going to bring back normalcy, it's not just a question of like talking about normalcy. It's about the pathway to normalcy, like giving people like the foundation to be able to build that American dream, with health care and a roof over their head and affordable groceries and a union job. Like these are the types of things that you want to be able to pitch to these people, and you want to be bold. And if he talks about a public option on the campaign trail, which is a step forward, it is a significant step forward, and it would not only be a step forward for the people on the public option, it would also be a step forward for those on the private option, as well as the private companies would have to compete with the public option and assumedly bring their prices down to either match or at least compete with that public option. So, I mean, he should have been more on the forefront when it comes to this. I also just don't think that the fact that we need to message this to the public necessarily translates to us being in the advantageous position to pressure Joe Manchin.
$5 minimum wage, which he didn't even try to fight for once he was in office. Yeah, it actually pisses me off, and I want to see the president reflect the frustration of his base when it comes to those key issues, and to at least punish the members of the caucus that are they're disloyal and that embarrass the whole agenda and administration.
Do my podcast co-hosts have any opinions on Manchin to get a $15 an hour minimum wage in West Virginia?
I think that, I was just going to say, like, I think that these views are somewhat compatible. Like, I think that Hutch, I think where you're wrong is that, look, at the end of the day, like, the Trump project, right, has been a long one at this point, right? It's been almost a decade long. By the time Trump, leaves, I guess we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed. His last term in 2029, that'll have been Donald Trump leading the conservative movement in this country for 12 years, right? A very long time. And we see some of the fruits of that today, right? We see the consolidation of power within the court and the Supreme Court. We see, like Pisco said, the consolidation of power within the caucus, and he's able to essentially just dictate things to the caucus. And how did he accomplish that, right? It wasn't through, my friend John McCain or, the analogous thing that Joe Biden did with Joe Manchin. It's like, look, at some points, you have to try and make long-term decisions in the composition of the caucus. You're always going to have moderates and progressives, and those people are always going to disagree. Same thing with the Republican Party to some degree, but at the very least, I think it's probably worth it long-term to instill a kind of like coalition culture within the party and say, look, we ran as a party on $15 an hour minimum wage. I won that election. If you're against me, like, I don't care that you've been a senator from Delaware for, the last 20 years. Like, that's what the party believes in. That's what the base believes in, as evident by the election. And you're going to get primaried if you don't support it. And look, to the discredit of, some of Donald Trump's candidates that he endorses in the primaries, he's going to lose some of those elections, right? Like he ends up primarying candidates and they end up losing 100%. Otherwise winnable elections. But we see that in the long run, those global macro trends that kind of dictate who wins and loses a lot of these elections end up pulling through. And now Donald Trump has, larger majorities in the Senate. I don't know what the House looked like when he took office, but he's able to actually have consolidated that and get a lot of things that he otherwise didn't think he would be able to get done.
Econoboi, do you think that Joe Manchin, he was going to be threatened by a primary?
Well, Hutch, you're completely disregarding my point. Okay,
no, I'm not. What do you mean?
No. My point wasn't that you could get Manchin to change his mind. Manchin didn't even run for re-election. He left the Democratic Party. He was an independent when he retired from the Senate. Like, I don't know that there's substantially anything that you could have done. I think to the Vanguard's point, there's probably something to be said about at least like the appearance of giving a and like trying.
Which was a huge part, which, by the way, was a huge thing that led to Trump's re-election, was the fact that everyone felt like Joe Biden was asleep at the wheel, that he was feckless, that he was too old to whip his own caucus into line when it mattered. That's why he lost. That's why we have Trump. That Joe Biden didn't even fight for the American people.
I don't know if the reason that people thought that Biden was weak is because he didn't whip his own caucus specifically. I think that is one way to project strength, but there's many ways to project strength. I think he could have projected strength through offering a more bold vision. I think he could have projected strength by having better public appearances, not fumbling over his own words. I think he could have projected strength more by just showing himself in public more. Like when he goes and walks on a picket line, do that on many picket lines in many states across the country. I mean, there's a bunch of things he could have done to project strength. But I mean, like, yeah, being tougher on some in the caucus is one of those things. But again, when I read about Joe Biden in private conversations, when he doesn't show in public, I read about a man that can have quite a short temper. Or maybe that's just staffers being, staffers. Oh, no, don't hit me with the stapler, Miss Klobuchar.
What you're saying doesn't mean anything. When you say something like
that, what do you mean it doesn't mean anything? What do you mean it doesn't mean anything?
When you say just use the bully pulpit, you're not suggesting anything.
No. He just said something very specific.
Okay,
yeah, go for it.
Okay, here's what I was going to say, because this is my point, Hutch, right? Like, I don't want to miss the forest for the trees just because we want to, like, have good fireworks show for the audience, which I'm totally into, by the way. We're all crushing. But the reality is that the point that we're making, and I think Econoboi, I thought you laid it out extremely well, right? The American people do not believe that the Democratic Party is full of fighters, right? Gavin used the term asleep at the wheel. The reality is that the reason they couldn't get to Kamala Harris or Joe Biden across the finish line was because they did not even try to whip votes in West Virginia.
Let me give you an example of somebody doing some quote unquote fighting, quote unquote, that I think is a good example of what is a good example is Gavin Newsom recently responded to Trump's open statement of, I want to gerrymander Texas. I think if we can gerrymander Texas, get 5 more votes in Congress, and then stop the Democrats from taking the House, right? He's very open about the fact he wants to gerrymander Texas, completely irrespective of new demographic information or census data, which is how usually congressional maps are redrawn, based upon new census data that comes out. And he just wants to do it to prepare for this incoming election and to shore up more votes. Gavin Newsom coming out and saying, if you do that, we're thinking about having a constitutional referendum in order to change the Constitution and see if we can move around some votes in California to pick up a few more Dem seats. Now, there are 9 Republican seats in California. Do you think it's impossible for them to pick up a few if they went out of the way to purposely gerrymander to counteract that? Now, I don't want that. I don't want that, like, that arms race. I think it's a bad idea to, you know, go down that for the country. But making it clear that there will be consequences if you go down that road, and that there will be returning fire, acts as a deterrent against it.
West Virginia, right? They didn't even try to say, okay, we're going to go
And
down
they
to
didn't
Arizona.
even make it feel like they cared about $15 an hour. No one even knew that. You think any of those voters in West Virginia even knew that Biden gave a fuck about $15 an hour? No, because he didn't. That's the problem. He never even pretended to care, other than to get a few suckers' votes.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Does everybody agree here that generally?
I am not convinced that Joe Biden didn't want $15 minimum wage. And that I can genuinely believe that he just failed politically to get it achieved due to both the Senate parliamentarian and the 2 votes, and him prioritizing other legislative agendas, which were much more directly achievable, at least in his eyes. But I do agree that him not going out there and beating the bully pulpit more and being a more visible presence did compromise his presidency, and it compromised his ability to try to bring the American public along on this on these agenda items. I mean, how many? I mean, hell, even the most Dem loyalist, like Joe Biden did nothing wrong, individual within the Democratic Party will usually throw out some line of, oh God, our messaging. We really failed on the messaging. How do people not know about the glory of Joe Biden's infrastructure bill? How do they not know about XYZ? And I mean, partially that's Joe Biden's fault.
Generally speaking, in the modern,
In fact, I would even put it in, like, at least I would even put the majority of the blame with the administration when it comes to messaging this out there, and not like really getting his foot out there, throwing himself into new media environments. The media is changing, and I think that, you know, as Joe Biden was slowing down, that slowed down his public media appearances as well. Hell, I might have seen the majority of Biden era interviews in office because, like, they just were so rare and far in between. I could never begin to see the majority of Donald Trump's interview and or speeches from when he was in office. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine that playlist?
era, what the American voters typically do is, if they give a trifecta to a particular party, they take it away 2 years later. It has basically been, this has been
because the party abuses their fucking trust and doesn't do anything. That's why. If Biden had actually done the things that I wanted him to, he would have.
I'm just giving you this is what happens with voters, right? So in that time, when a president,
not just as a natural,
when a president is inaugurated, they know they're on a ticking clock, and they only have a couple years to pursue.
Like this right here, AOC is ringing out the same thing Gavin Newsom talked about, this reciprocal action.
We are in the state of Texas, that we start organizing against this assault on voting rights in the United States. And, you know, that being said, you know, as far as New York State goes or any other state goes, if Republicans want to set a new, you know, if Republicans want to play by these rules, then I think that we shouldn't have one set of rules for one and the other set of rules for another. I think we need to even a playing board. But ideally, what happens is that Texas preserves their lines as they've been drawn, as they voted on. So thank you.
pursue as much legislation as they can get done. And to Jesiah's point, but you may not like the final version of those bills, but Biden was legislatively the most successful president of the modern era since like LBJ. Now you want to like quibble about like $15 an hour. Would it have been better if he spent more time on a useless fight?
Hutch, you're talking about this like he won re-election, though. You're talking about this like he won re-election.
Senator, wouldn't it have been him better to just get done what he could get done before he loses Congress? Like that's the argument. You can't simply say. Vaguely, you can't simply say like, just go to West Virginia, send AOC to West Virginia. Who gives a fuck?
Have you not seen she's been on a Fight the Oligarchy tour and it's been massively successful? Let me talk for 1 second about this, guys. I was just in.
To be clear, progressives going to red country gets a reaction because they usually don't go there because it seems like a losing effort. But the fact that people turn out for a rally doesn't mean that you've changed the broad general like, now there's a sea change in West Virginia. There's progressives in West Virginia. It's just if AOC went there, you would find every single one of them would be in the room with her. And these are some things you have to invest in over time. And it's, again, I'm not against even like trying to shorten that time window as short as possible, trying to be like, how much can we gain between election years? Can we gain 5 to 10 points in the next election? How much can we invest? I'm all on board with that. I just failed to see how this would have worked in the Manchin case. I just failed to see how this would have worked in these cases due to the unique circumstances of where they are. And the fact that like West Virginia is Trump country by mega margins.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma doing a segment for the Vanguard where I went to one of the Fight the Oligarchy tours, right? You guys ever been to Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Never.
No.
Okay, it is not exactly liberal country, okay? It's not the kind of place where they're tuning into podcasts that are woke. Okay, guess what that room was filled with? It was filled with people who wanted to see socialism. They loved AOC, and they were union guys that were fixing airplanes. They were farmers. They were teachers. There were tons of indigenous folks that showed up. Oklahoma has a huge indigenous population that's underrepresented. If you were to ask a pollster like Ezra Klein, he would tell you not to waste your time in Oklahoma. But do you know what Bernie Sanders said to those people? He said, I do not want to be a part of a government that sees red and blue states. I want to be a part of a government that leads, that delivers for the American people. When I went to the U.S. Senate, I said I was going to stand up for the United States of America. That's what I'm here to do today. And people were losing it, man. They couldn't believe that somebody actually showed up for them. You're telling me that if you put on national television, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, take your pick, famous people, Gavin Newsom from the party, they all show up to West Virginia, whoever it is that you can get. I'm not saying all these people would agree, but a lot of them would agree because everybody loves to have their picture taken with the president, and they would have shown up, and it would have been a huge event, and it would have shown the American people that Joe Biden was going to fight for them. Sometimes optics matter. That would have been a time that optics matter. I'm not saying...
Okay, now, saying that would play well with the media and with the American public generally is one thing. Saying that would achieve a $15 minimum wage, a policy objective, is another.
It would have worked. I'm saying the American people would have been like, yeah, Joe, thank you for showing up for us, which you've never done over the time you're president.
You need Manchin. It's in a 50-50 Senate. You need Manchin's vote for literally every single piece of legislation that you want to get done. And you're saying that the very first thing he should have done is gone to civil war with Joe Manchin and threatened a primary because we didn't get one particular provision.
I mean, is that not what Trump
ARP
does with the defectors in his caucus? Like, is that not?
Do we really want to emulate? Like, do you want a Republican, like a Democratic
win?
Party?
Well, wait a minute.
Personally,
I think that elides the point. Well, wait a minute. I think you got to address this, and it goes all the way back to. I've been spending the last 30 minutes trying to look for what Pisco had to say about Mike Johnson's first vote, and I can't find the goddamn thing. That motherfucker. There's nothing on it. Fuck you, Pisco. But listen, I think it elides the point that they're making, which is it doesn't matter if you want people to emulate Trump or not. They're making the case that it is possible for presidents to bully their parties into line.
Yes.
It's called whipping votes.
I want you to deal, Hutch, I do want you to deal with the Trump example. Either refute it or say yes, but that's Trump.
Well, it's West Virginia. It's West Virginia. So can I step in? I want to say...
No, you. Hang on. Let Hutch respond to that.
Why are you flip-flopping when you were agreeing with me when we had the same conversation with Kyle
bro,
you're flip-flopping because your Vanguard boys are on the podcast. has.
Yo,
I see you,
this is
Jessiah.
Man,
insecurity.
I'm about to roundhouse kick Pisco. He already has the beard off. I'm gonna take the mustache off the next time I see him. And then you and
Jesus
I,
Christ, guys.
Hutch, listen, you're so tall, I'm gonna kick the shit out of your ankles. Listen to me real quick.
See, Hutch, there's a W right there. I'm 5'7", so you know, whenever if I've ever hurt your feelings, you just fall asleep at night knowing that you know.
I know,
I'd have to
man.
get really
Us short
expensive
people.
surgery
I
to
know
be as tall as
he's
you.
like 6'4". I know.
Let me stop
I
you.
agree.
Let me stop you. Okay. You go to war with Joe Manchin. You say, I'm going to primary you. You block you. Hold on. Wait, just hold on. I'm going to your mom and I'm going to primary you and we're going to replace you. Okay. And he says, you know what?
You don't even know where her urn
He says,
is.
Biden now polling at 100%.
Hold on. And then he says, you know what? I don't like this at all. I'm an independent. You guys don't get the majority. That's that. What do you do?
Hard to bully Manchin.
Okay.
Hard to bully Nelson. I want to agree with
What do you do?
Would you just let me get through the fucking thing? Just shut up and let me get shut the up and
All right,
let
fine.
me get
Okay.
through the sentence.
All right. Pisco wants to talk.
Shut up for a second. I agree with you that Joe Manchin was not bullyable. I want you to address the notion they brought up Trump. And I can't speak for Pisco.
Josiah, are you stupid? So the response, Manchin is not bullyable, is a response to your question is, why don't you bully? Okay? That's
That
Hutch's
wasn't my
response.
fucking question.
Why don't you be like Trump and bully?
It literally
was. You're like,
Yeah,
why
We can go back and play the tape where I said you are not your point
Oh my
aligns
God.
theirs. I said they are saying that a president can theoretically bully a party. I
Well, can I
want you
actually
to
clarify
address
what
that.
my position is, just because I think we're
A.
splitting. I think you guys are splitting hairs here, right? Because I think that it's fair to address what Hutch
Oh
is
my
saying, right?
God.
Which is the fact that Joe Manchin might say, "F you then, I am eat a bag of dicks," and go. But here's the thing: the American people are tired of getting crumbs, right? They already expect you to kind of be like, okay, the Republicans beat us, blah blah blah. You have to find a way to win. So you get on. Say you get on your infrastructure bill, right? You get Joe Manchin doesn't vote for it. Do you not see what Donald Trump has proven that you can do without Congress? You say, guys, give me 2 more years. Okay, we're gonna, or however long Joe Manchin had left. He's, I guess,
But I think the ultimate problem is not so much Biden's treatment of Joe Manchin, but it's the fact that he didn't even seem like he cared about the policy in the
That's
first
it.
place. We're talking about these policies that he's supposed to be fighting for, but no one even knows he supports them.
I agree with that. That I agree with for the Vanguard. I agree with when it comes to I think everybody. I don't know for Hutch if Hutch is on board with that, but they need to go out there and make it seem like they're in a life or death struggle for the American dream. And if they can do that, this idea that they're out there fighting tooth and nail for affordable groceries. Trump goes out there and he says he's going to fight for the economy. Says a bunch of tariff mumbo jumbo fucking economic black magic bullshit. Then polls better than Harris on the economy, wins, and then the American people on the night of the election are Googling what the fuck a tariff is and immediately saying, oh, wait a second, I didn't know we pay the tax. I was told they pay. Wait, I pay? And then people started seeing okay, estimated increase. Oh boy, seems like June's starting to see some effects of the inflation. Oh boy, economists predict July will be worse. Like it's painful. It's painful, but a lot of it is messaging. And Trump is a masterful messenger. And while, he might not always speak in the most like hoity-toity or like classy way, he speaks in a way at least everyone can understand. And he speaks constantly. 2 things Biden didn't always accomplish.
Like I said, he'd have a lot better chance of getting reelected and of being popular if people felt like he gave a fuck about this, if they felt like it was actually something on his agenda, not something that could conveniently hit the cutting room floor as soon as he runs into any sort of obstruction from his own party. And that's exactly how it felt. It felt like Joe Biden was more than happy to use that as an excuse to say, oh, sorry, guys, what do you want me to do? The thing I promised to do is now on the cutting room floor because of these things that I knew would be an issue before I promised it. So it's like, why the you even promise it? Just to lie to everyone and get their hopes up? You knew this would be a problem.
If you didn't run on it, you'd be like, why aren't you running on it?
No, I'd rather he be honest. I genuinely would rather he be honest. I would. And I voted for politicians who aren't running on it. I voted for Kamala Harris, even though she was running on a bunch of shit that I hated, including going around talking about how all the #1 CEOs and corporation leaders in the company signed off on all of her stupid crypto policies and all her AI bullshit. Like, at least she was honest about it. I don't actually think that it's a good idea, though, to run for something or, win a primary based on these ideas, including a public option and a $15 an hour minimum wage, things that would substantially uplift Americans who desperately need it, and then immediately say, sorry, oops, some bullshit happened, and now I have to, throw you under the bus and renege on this promise.
You don't seem to fully appreciate the role of the Congress. Period. End of story.
No, like I just said, though, he didn't.
The thing is, right? I don't even think it's, again, like I said earlier, that Joe Biden didn't want a $15 minimum wage. The Republicans, of course, would vote against it. Senate parliamentarian was another problem. They had a 50-50 split, with Harris being a tie-breaking vote. So you need to get Sinema and Manchin on board, when Sinema has already shown since then that she's willing to jump independent and then crash her campaign into the side of a mountain. So looking back, I'm even more confident in the inability to succeed this pressure campaign than it was at the moment when I did at least consider it, because I was trying to, at the time think of a way, how can we get this $15 minimum wage thing through? But I mean, wait 1 second. Let me hear that again.
Fully appreciate the role of the Congress. Period. End of story.
No, like I just said, though, he didn't even try to make, like, with various politicians that understand this issue, they know that, and they build a pressure campaign to make it so that it's political suicide for you to oppose.
But the thing is, when they blocked that legislation, the Republicans, what political negatives did they feel for that? I don't even know if necessarily it needs to be, hey, let's go to West Virginia and campaign XYZ. I think it should be, if you're heading towards midterms, heading towards a general, focusing on, if this legislation is stopped and there's no way to go forward on it, you have to make enough of a majority in order to get it through. You have to hammer the opposition for opposing legislation. For example, like, how much did Jon Stewart from The Daily Show contribute to that firefighter legislation to help the firefighters from 9/11 get health insurance, health care coverage, as there were Republicans trying to block it? How much did that attention help? A lot. That attention helped quite a lot. And even if it doesn't help them move because they're bought out by interests, maybe it can move the American public. And even if it moves them in just marginal ways by 2 to 3 percentage points, that's 12 to 15 seats in the House. That's 20 seats in the House. That means that you have room to pressure people and you have room to lose people.
This policy. Joe Biden didn't do that with the right policies. He did it with the wrong ones and bungled the ones that he was right about, like the Afghanistan war.
It wasn't even just Manchin. Like, Sinema was, Pisco, I know you wanted to jump in.
I just want to say I'm going to be a bridge builder here for sure, 100%, because I'm going to yell in kind of both directions. On the one hand, you can't bully Manchin, but I think that there's a kind of lesson from the Inflation Reduction Act. Everyone said that the environmental policy that Biden was trying to push was dead in the water. They said it for months and months and months and months. The Inflation Reduction Act was a surprise for a lot of people. And I think give Biden some credit. I think that that's an incredible package in terms of now it's being diluted and somewhat destroyed by Trump and the big beautiful
following
bill.
election, Pisco. That's the problem.
No, I agree with you that. I think that's Biden's greatest failure is, and this
the
is where
presidency has to be an 8-year project in the year 2025, is my view. So I think that if you fail the first time with Joe Manchin, you have to dedicate your entire presidency to fucking him and replacing the seat.
100%.
100%. You just said you couldn't bully Manchin.
Whoa. So 100% on the notion. I don't know why you're so triggered, Hutch. So first of all, I was defending that you can't bully Manchin, but on the specific notion that the presidency is an 8-year project, that is 100% true. I totally agree with that. That's what I said. 100% agree with. Hutch, do you have a problem with me saying I agree with that point?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. So just to be clear, I totally agree. You can't really bully Manchin. It has to go. You have to go.
You have to primary him. That's why it's an 8-year project.
But I will say the following: to pretend that Joe Biden, and this is all coming out from reporting, was engaged as he should have been on domestic fronts is now proving more and more to be untrue. It appears that it appears that he outsourced domestic policy to Ron Klain. He had minimal meetings with his cabinet.
He didn't even do cabinet meetings. I was about to say that.
And so it's a systemic problem of Biden in terms of his failures as a communicator and his failure of engagement on the domestic front. And that is unfortunately a legacy that I do think has contributed to the rise of Trump. That's not to say, and I don't want to denigrate the good domestic agenda that was done. I think the Vanguard, I think is, what Biden did, he got tangible wins for the American people domestically in a way that other presidents didn't. I didn't hear you really to say that that's not true. I think you said it was like watered down. I think it's watered down because he was trying to make, build bridges where he could, but he did pass through some historic legislation. I think you guys would acknowledge that.
Oh,
but
100% he did. My problem is that he embraced bipartisanship in a way that was totally detrimental in a time when he should have been fighting. I feel like what people
He embraced
want
it when he
is-
had to.
Well, I mean, when it comes to like the infrastructure bill and like legislation like that, there was a certain amount of bipartisanship that was necessary in order to get the legislation through. But I also do think that there's a certain amount of sentimentality that entered his psyche when dealing with some of these legislators, and this type of return to normalcy doesn't necessarily work if the times themselves aren't normal. You can't just declare that, we've returned to normalcy. Well, like, oh, we're no longer in the storm. And then like a big, like, ice ball of hail just knocks you upside the head, eyeball pops out. Yeah, but we're no longer in the storm.
It was a divided government when he was doing bipartisan stuff. He had to do bipartisan stuff. What other
And
choice?
guess what? The people said, we don't want you anymore. We want a guy that's going to go play hardball.
To be
my
fair,
argument-
I do think it was Joe Biden's age made it basically he was unreelectable. Like I do feel he
Fair
was
enough.
so old, he was so in cognitive decline that like that ultimately had more to do with the way people voted for him than like the Joe Manchin thing. To be totally fair to Joe Biden, and I also think that if Joe Biden had been
Most Americans don't even know who Joe Manchin is, and if they do, they just West Virginian senator, and then the details are lost.
a younger version of himself, he would have been able to better communicate the wins that he did secure, because that was another huge thing. The communications department in the last administration was just pathetic. They didn't brag about anything that they accomplished. Most people didn't even know what they accomplished.
Somebody just donated $10. Beats. Here's some beer money for the Yusuf Like. Hey, I'm hosting a party, actually, a little small party this Saturday for the Usyk fight. It'll be fun. I'm excited for it. I want to put money on it, but I can't do DraftKings Sportsbooks here, both because I don't really like DraftKings Sportsbook and also because it's banned in the country. I already tried.
Even though, as you mentioned a couple times accurately, they accomplished more than previous administrations had.
I fully agree with your. So, like, what's going on right now with the Democratic Party is they are just fully in terms of acclimating to this new paradigm of media. They don't understand the climate whatsoever. And so Biden did go out there and like visit like small cities in Michigan and Pennsylvania to celebrate, you know, the impact of the infrastructure deal. But who the fuck was there? It was like C-SPAN with like 17 viewers. Nobody was tweeting about it. Nobody was
sucks at
posting about
media,
it.
and that's half the job now. Hutch.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with all of this. I agree with all of this.
Right. And I think you agree with this part. And so that's why I'm glad, because I think that's part of what's being spoken about from the Vanguard is the communication part is 50% of more than 50% of the job now, both internal communications, that is to your other stakeholders within the government, other branches of government, that's to Joe Manchin. And he was able to negotiate, but it was delayed, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, and also externally, right? And getting public support for ideas, getting pressure, right? MAGA is able to, or Trump at times, I think less so now, is able to leverage this like momentum, right? And you often feel it, right? Like you get this report, and a lot of it's theater for sure, but
Even
sometimes
before
it's genuine.
Even before Trump, remember the Rhino label? Like Republicans have always been better at shaming their fucking defectors, whereas Democrats, like you never saw Joe Biden taunting Joe Manchin and saying, "F this guy, he's a dino, he's a traitor, he's helping Donald Trump, he's a secret Republican who's a wolf in sheep's clothing." That's what he should have said, not just because it's good politics, but because it's true. Joe Manchin is a piece of shit.
Wait, hold on. You have not reconciled the obvious problem with this. Let's say he does that. Let's say you're a dino. I'm going to primary. I'm going to mom. And he says, I don't like your posture. You have no leverage over me. I'm going to be independent, and
You
no longer
imprison
have-"
him. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm serious. Like, how do you
respond to that?
reconcile with that?
100%. Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. That's why
Biden comes out, he does the speech. I'm deporting Joe Manchin to El Salvador. We just got off the phone. We're dealing with the homegrown traitors. Oh boy, it's very different Biden.
Pisco and I shared the moment where we agreed that, hey, this is an 8-year project, right? When you're battling a Congress that is 100% against the American people, like Joe Manchin, like Christian Sinema, right? You can't accomplish the goals. The American people just voted, and we're operating under the time Joe Biden's just getting into office, right? Okay. They voted for him to be an antidote to Donald Trump. They're scared because of COVID. They want somebody who's competent. They want, vaccine rollout that's sufficient, right? They want all of these things. That's what he's been voted on. So you have to say, this man is standing in the way of what I want to accomplish. If you want a higher minimum wage, we need to know that this man is standing in the way of it. You make him a pariah. You make his name mud in Washington. And in the meantime, you do not pass that piece of pivotal legislation. You go to town with every single executive order that comes across your desk. You make that man's life hell, and you also go to work uplifting the American people. You declare a state of emergency. You talk about how healthcare is a human right. You talk about how we're going to do every single thing you can. We're going to make sure that nobody pays a cent of student loans as long as I'm president, right? We're going to make sure that we fight it in the court and not a dollar is collected, and we fight all the insurance or the interest rates all the way. We go after everything that we could do with worker protection to make sure that it's harder to exploit your workforce. Let's make sure that we're supplementing every single court that we can along the way to make sure that a company like Uber doesn't get to contract their drivers as a 1099 employee that has to pay a bunch of taxes at the end of the year and gets totally ratted. Let's make sure that we're uplifting those people at every step of the way. I think these are ideas that we would all agree are going to be beneficial and tangible to the American people. And then over your 8-year presidency, you do start to accomplish the goals that you need the power of Congress to do, right? Because nobody can just, overrule Congress, although Donald Trump is giving it a run for his money right now, and he even has control of Congress, right? So you say we're going to do every single thing that we can from the power of the desk. We're going to fight everything in the court, and we're going to make your life as good as we can while we get rid of Joe Manchin, Christian Sinema, and bring back the party of the people.
Okay, so let's.
Okay, but if in that process Joe Manchin just decides to no longer play ball with Biden's agenda and retaliation, how do you pass anything now that you no longer have a Senate majority? Do you just wait for the midterms and just try to do everything you can without a Senate majority in your first 2 years and hope the midterms you're able to expand the Senate majority through 2 years of messaging of I told you what I would do if I won the presidency. Well, let me tell you what I'll do now if I win the midterms, now that we can't do the things I said we wanted to do. Which was the problem, right? That he said he wanted to do things and did not do those things. And in this pathway, he would possibly be doing even less of those things, of what was achievable.
Let's game this out. So it's ARP negotiations. It's the first 2 months of the presidency. This is his first bill that he wants to get passed. He does exactly what you're saying right now. He goes to war with Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin defects. He loses control of Congress. Now,
why would you lose control of Congress? You're just stacking the deck in your favor.
No, hold on. I just told you that there would be a risk that Joe Manchin would defect and say, "I don't."
Wait, if we don't have a Senate majority with a tie-breaking Harris vote, then we've lost control of Congress. We no longer have the control of the presidency, the House, and the Senate. We then would just have control of the presidency and the House.
Like the way you're treating me, I'm going to defect. There was
because of all the executive orders
a risk of him doing that, by the way.
President we have, so we can play this counterfactual game all day.
Are you acknowledging or not?
That wasn't a good response. That was a valid question from Hutch, and that was
not that there was a risk for him to defect in that way if Trump.
Yes, but you're assuming that after that defection, that Joe Biden loses Congress. I disagree with that. That's what I'm disputing.
If you give that Senate gavel, do they have a gavel in the Senate? If you give that gavel to Mitch McConnell, now not only do you not get the IRA, which did a lot of really good shit, and not just for environment, but also
in your favor. You're just saying, imagine all these bad things happen. I could say, imagine all these good things happen because I did all these executive orders.
Do you not? Okay, hang on.
Well, he's just saying. Well, okay. Well, then it's not a coin flip when it comes to the odds. Like Manchin, there is. Like Jim Justice, the current governor of West Virginia, was first elected as a Democrat and then party flipped. It's not even like, it's not only that this is not unprecedented. This isn't even unprecedented in Manchin's home during his term, during his time doing public service in West Virginia.
Podcast
I guess.
Hold on. I need to not feel crazy for a second. Podcast pros, do you think it was possible that if Biden would have done what they're suggesting that he should have done, that Manchin could have switched parties?
He didn't have the talent. Biden, it was too old. He couldn't do it. So this whole thing is, I agree with you, Hutch, in the sense that he couldn't do it. He did not have the capacity to do it. And Manchin, although I don't know that Manchin would be the type to like just never vote on judicial nominees anymore because you're talking some shit. And I think that there are ways he could have done it. But like fundamentally, I agree with you. It's not possible. Biden could not have done it. He did not have it in him. It's not in his character to do the kind of play that the Vanguard are talking about.
It was a 40-year-old Biden in his prime. Could he have forced a $15 an hour minimum wage on Manchin?
No, Hutch,
Force the issue?
Yeah, obviously to your point,
He could have been. It could have been Joe Biden, 25-year-old, just like full of protein powder. I don't think it changes the fundamental calculus all that much. If he had better tools to advertise his message, then maybe it increases the odds slightly. But that like option of defection, of like, look, I'm the independent, by taking the D away from Joe Manchin's name, that's not necessarily like a negative in West Virginia.
it's clear that what you're saying is true, that it was a
Hell, in this age of politics, being able to advertise yourself as an independent's pretty, significant. But also, here's another thing, and I think this was said earlier. If Joe Manchin's not going to run again for another term, period, then all of this goes out the window.
possibility that it would happen. I mean, I think that what's fair, I guess, to say at least, is that literally did happen with both Manchin and Sinema. They both turned independent eventually.
Why are you doing this? This is like wildly disingenuous. He switched parties.
Why is that disingenuous?
He switched parties after they lost control of Congress when it didn't matter, bro. That's
irrelevant. Already opposed bills that didn't matter.
Hutch, but I think what you've never addressed is this idea that
was that true of Sinema too? I don't know if that was true of Sinema, but he is right about Manchin switching after we lost control.
I mean, I've already conceded fully, like personally. I don't know if the Vanguard boys would agree with me, but like I've already conceded that. Look, you might have a world where you do what the Vanguard guys are saying, and all of a sudden Manchin goes independent, 2 years earlier, and maybe you don't get the IRA passed, and you have to deal with like the current subsidies instead of the expanded ones or whatever. Like that's a risk that you have. And similarly, and I compared to the Trump project, that he loses a lot of elections that he would maybe otherwise be able to win because he endorses radicals in primaries and they end up winning the primaries. But again, that long-term compositional change of the Republican Party seems to have netted them out policy wins when they're actually able to control the government, right? And I think that the Democrats should engage in a similar project for the long-term health of, at this point, the country. So you would give up 200 plus judicial appointments in every piece of legislation that he passed just for this vague notion of like, we're going to be a party of fighters now? But Hutch, I think that the problem is that I really believe in the Democratic Party platform, right? Like, I think it's not just like, oh, it'd be nice to have, these are marginal improvements. Like, we're talking about, you said you take seriously the idea that, the threats to democracy, and this is such a big deal. And I think that for the long-term health of the country, and also just like the people in the country, to the Vanguard boys' point, the idea of having a universal healthcare system, having like a high wage floor, these kind of like expansive welfare policies and things like that, like, our policies are so bad. I feel like I am answering it, right? So are you saying that would be an acceptable sacrifice? No 200 plus judges and all that legislation, none of that. Are you saying cutting all of that would be worth it to establish a new... Obviously, Hutch, it's a question of expected value and the risks you're willing to take. So I don't like the idea of the scenario that you're painting. If there's 100% scenario that what you're saying happens, you might think a little bit differently about it, but there's obviously not 100% chance, right? There's every chance in the world that you engage in this project and maybe the idyllic version of what the Vanguard is talking about would happen, or at the very least, something settles out in the middle or something. Like you never really know how these things are going to go. But I was just going to say, last sentence, that I think establishing a basic standard within the...
I mean, I could maybe see like this pressure if Joe Biden had the verbal tools and the extra time and effort to put into this, I could see maybe pressuring Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, best case scenario, to some middle ground between the two. I could.
Longtime gutter chat lurker. Keep up the good work.
Whoa,
be safe out there.
Beats a tier 4. I don't get tier 4s very often. My goodness, thank you very much, Beats. I appreciate that. Incite chat, meaning Jeff Bezos doesn't get a dime. The YouTube executives do not get a dime. Every single dime goes towards freelance or journalism here. And hey, if it's a recurring tier 4, then you can also continue to support the channel month by month, as the rest of you can also do. Go to DylanBurnsLIVE. Thank you, Beats. I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you. Tier 4 is as high as it goes. Tier 4 is the top. Tier 4 is dedication. Tier 4 is my Delta Squad. Thank you.
Democratic Party that, hey, I don't care if you don't like this policy. We have to do these things not only because, you know, it's the platform that we ran.
And they went from gutter chat to site chat. So I just got to say, you know, beautiful.
On, and maybe there's some long-term gains to that, but also it's just really good for the American people, Hutch, and like it's worth like saying, hey, moderate asshole, you, like we have to actually get this done because it's good. Like we have
you don't need to do this thing where you're like, I'm the one that actually cares about these policies. Meanwhile, you would pursue a strategy that would result in no judicial appointments and no pieces of legislation.
You don't know that
what
for
if you
sure,
want?
Hutch. It's
But
the risk that you're willing to take, right?
Okay,
Like
let's fine. Put the risk aside. What is the possible benefit? Are you going to move Joe Manchin?
Oh. I guess my computer has decided that the video is over. At 36.
Hutch, and like it's worth like saying, hey, moderate asshole, you, like we have to actually get this done because it's good. Like we have
You don't need to do this thing where you're like, I'm the one that actually cares about these policies. Meanwhile, you would pursue a strategy that would result in no.
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's what Econoboi was saying. I think Econoboi was more leaning towards the idea that there's a general trend in where we want to point the party. And by drawing these lines in the sand, and also, you not only are you getting the opportunity for either gaining ground or gaining your objectives, with, of course, the risk of backfiring, it also pushes the party in the direction that we want, towards bigger, bolder ideas. I think that's what he's trying to get at.
Judicial appointments and no pieces of legislation.
You don't know that
what
for
if you
sure,
want?
Hutch. It's
But
the risk that you're willing to take, right?
Okay,
like
let's fine. Put the risk aside. What is the possible benefit? Are you going to move Joe Manchin on this? Yes or no?
He moved on the IRA.
well,
No,
yeah. I don't.
Hold on. Are you going to move him on $15 an hour?
No, Hutch, to answer
I
your
don't think so.
question, to answer your question as directly as I can,
By the way,
it is
it's not
irrelevant
as
to
simple
my
as just
point.
moving
I
him on
don't.
$15 an hour. It's moving him on $15 an hour and then moving him on firing the Senate parliamentarian. Both things he was opposed to, and cinema.
think so ultimately that you're able to get
benefit analysis. What is the possible benefit,
Dude,
right?
This all ended with Donald Trump being our president. How can you act like the risk benefit analysis worked out in our favor? Like that's the whole problem right here. Like you're talking about the weeds here. We got the fascists in power as a result of this because the American people didn't believe that Democrats could fight anything, including a fascist. And so now we've got people getting black bagged off of the street. Now we don't have a Department of Education. Now 12 million people are losing their Medicaid. Now the hospital I was born in can no longer deliver babies in the east side of Kansas City, Missouri, because they thought those black mothers that largely make it up nowadays because of gentrification and the fact that all of these people have been shoved to the east poor side of Kansas City aren't worth it to have their own NICU or any kind of delivery services. These are the real life consequences of Donald Trump. And because the Democrats thought they could people and lie to them about, oh, we're actually fighting for $15 in minimum wage, or oh, we're actually going to cancel your student loans, when they never had an intention of doing it. They rolled over immediately, so they lost and handed
They
the
never
keys
had
over
the
to
intention
white
of doing
supremacists.
student loans.
No, they did not.
Well, why did he do it?
Did it work out? You know what I'm saying? Like, listen to yourself.
What do you
People
mean,
hate
did
it.
it work out?
Oh, the Republicans struck it down. That's what the Democrats always say.
No, the court struck it down, bro. What do you mean?
That's why we got to pack the court.
Well,
Okay.
I think the Vanguard walked into a bad one because obviously student loans was one where Biden seemed to actually he did actually try to cancel student loan debt broadly. But that's I think that
Did he try it once by executive order?
he tried to
He tried
cancel
multiple
it.
things.
Go for it.
So I mean, I think that Biden deserves all the credit in the world for the student loan stuff. I think there's one additional thing he could have tried, but I really think he went through all the stops to try to get that passed.
What's the one additional thing you think he could have tried?
I think he should have shredded up all the loan documents for every individual in the country after they lost the election, and
Enron
just
that shit.
and just as a core executive power, just like shred all of the loan documents and officially renunciate all the loans. Now that might have had some problems, but if you make it it impracticable for anybody to prove that those loans exist. I think that's the one additional thing he could have done, but that's not in Biden's character to do that. There could have been other ways, like other documentation, but it would have been such a mess. But I do think he should have done it.
Imagine the political capital Republicans would have to expend.
I just can't accept the fact that
we're going
Trump's
back
gonna
trying to
abolish
tape
the
this
Department
shit
of
together.
Education and that we cannot figure out a way. Like, how can you be the president that pen strokes away all of the billions and billions of dollars in PPP loans, right? How can you?
I'm telling you that what I would do is, as president, if I were in Biden's shoes, is after all that shit was struck down, I would order the Department of Education to shred all communications and documents related to those student loans. Now, that ultimately that might not have been effective because you could have had whistleblowers and people being like, we can't do this, we have to save all the documentation. But that is what I would have done, because I do think that it is important, and I think that after we have like the core executive rulings from the immunity decision, all that stuff, I think he should have done it for sure. But in terms of that, you can't go after Biden on the student loan stuff. He did really try that, and the courts really did him over on that. And then after the court struck it down, he went with other, the SAVE plan, other methods to try targeted relief, and they forgave like billions and billions of dollars of relief. It was a very good thing that they did. And it's one of those things that, they did not communicate well. That was a tangible win for the American people.
Yeah, I was under the impression, Pisco, and you can elucidate this, because my impression was that within the power of the Higher Education Act, and I have a tweet about this from the past, I would be curious as a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but the Higher Education Act, couldn't he potentially, it says right here that there was no discussion of the actions that he could have taken through what's called the HEROES Act. And it lies within the power of the Higher Education Act of 1965, which he made no effort to pursue as a final effort after his initial ruling.
They tried both, and it was in the middle of the rulemaking situation. It took longer because there's additional procedures that they had to run, and they had to have a notice and comment timeline. And so they did end up using that authority that you're invoking. And the one additional thing he could have tried is, instead of capping at 10,000, 20,000, he could have gotten rid of it all. They had a stronger argument on that because the legal provision there was waive or modify. And the court basically said, well, they can do, you can waive all of it, or you can modify a little bit. And they interpreted modify to be like a much more minor. But that would have been struck down anyway. And the court was signaling it that they were going to invoke what's known as the major questions doctrine. They didn't actually invoke the major questions doctrine in that case, but they basically signaled that if Biden tried to waive all the student loans, even though that was more cabin within the terms of the statute, that the Supreme Court was going to strike it down.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that anything that President Biden attempted to do via executive order or that could have been done congressionally via statute is still subject to judicial review, which means, to Pisco's point, the conservative supermajority on the court, they could have invented whatever reason they want to grant cert to the case.
Here lies the fundamental problem with why Democrats always lose, because everything you just said might be true, but I don't care about it, right? Because I just watched them forgive billions of dollars for rich assholes that bought boats with that money, and that's how the American people feel. You know what I'm saying?
No, I totally understand that. We totally agree, but that's also another reason why I think for a lot of us here, court reform is so central to the case and making it a case to the American people.
Somebody just asked if they can just shred student loan documents and the rest is history. Probably not. I'm sure. I think that's probably not the end of the story, but I really don't know. And I mean, even Pisco said it would probably just be largely symbolic.
People is so essential, because anything that you want done or we want done is going to have to be reviewed by the Supreme Court, and they're inclined to strike it down for precisely that reason. Trump will get away with his tax cuts for the rich and for all sorts of other egregious things because he has a sympathetic supermajority on the Supreme Court, and they're the final boss of democracy. Trump's the immediate problem, but the court represents an equally dangerous problem. It's just kind of looming in the background. You've got to deal with both.
I want to say one other thing. Like, I am not just trying to constantly split the baby here. I do agree ultimately with Hutch in terms of the empirics of the makeup in the Congress and the fact that the base of the Democrats, they're not like the MAGA base. They don't exert that kind of control and power. And so I do think that Biden has to approach it a different way. Where I agree strongly with the Vanguard is the following. Biden's presidency is a failure. It is a failure because the one most important thing that he promised, which is to restore the soul of this country and to stop Trump, he failed on. And that not exclusively. There were other challenges that are outside of his control, the resurgence of COVID, inflation, that kind of stuff, which, I don't blame on him. But the failure of communication and the lack of engagement due to his frailty, and then the hubris, the arrogant decision that if you really, I know people are clowning on Jake Tapper and stuff, and for good reason, but if you read the decision-making process that wasn't ever there when they decided to run for re-election, that this is how they were running the administration. And you can't tell me that that was optimal in terms of the domestic policy front and that everything was running on 4 cylinders when you're not meeting with your cabinet. And so do I believe that Biden was doing everything in his power and everything within his, communication ability while he was president on the domestic front? No, I don't believe that. And I think that there are probably other things he could have done. And I think that you don't need to go on the all out, call Manchin a pig fucker tour. There are other approaches that I think he would have taken, Hutch. And I think what you have to grant, Hutch, even though I agree with you that you couldn't push Manchin move heaven and earth, and you ultimately probably wouldn't get $50 minimum wage, there was not even an attempt to signal. You have to grant that they did not even protest a little bit on that. And that has to be something you acknowledge.
I think in the case of Manchin, there was one time because people were complaining about the fact that he wasn't picking this fight. And I think he was asked a question at a press conference and he said some mild criticism of Joe Manchin, and Joe Manchin turned around and wrote a fucking op-ed for the Wall Street Journal that said he wasn't budging. You. So my
what
point
would you do if
is
you were
that
president, Hutch? What would you do? Would you let him dog walk you like that?
What is you just told me a moment
Hutch,
ago.
would you be Manchin's bitch just like Biden?
No. I agree with you that you can't.
You have this precious little time and this precious little political capital to spend. It's just, these are the historical trends. George W. Bush after 9/11, that he was the only guy to buck this trend in the post-war era. Every single other time.
Biden bucked the trend. Biden bucked the trend in historic fashion in 2022.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about beating incumbents. I'm talking about when you give a trifecta to a government or to a political party, the American voters, you only get 2 years. It's just way easier to be on offense 24/7 when you're out of power, which is why you're going to see the Democrats have a lot of success in special elections.
Hutch, is your position just that Joe Biden should have rolled over and he was right to roll over, and that Joe Manchin was totally cool to call the shots, and you don't really see much of an issue with that? You're not frustrated by this?
You're trying to frame it as though that it's this moral issue, and it's not. No, it's not an issue of morality. It's an issue of practical consideration. If you only have so much time to deliver on your agenda with legislation that you can get passed through simple majority,
if you're saying that all it takes to stall an entire piece of legislation is an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and you're just going to okay, Mr. Manchin, you're right.
If I thought that I could get something out of it, then obviously you fight. But I don't think you guys fully appreciate.
That's what's gonna lead to more Donald Trump, though, dude.
I don't think you guys fully appreciate that the Congress sometimes says no. I'm
not saying that the problem was that the Congress gave. I just gave you 10 other solutions of what I would do if the Congress said no to me. My man, what I'm trying to point out to you is that if the Democrats ever wanted to have a chance of winning, they have to deliver on some of these promises. You might have a really good argument as to why they didn't deliver on any of these promises, but the American people.
You said your solution was you were going to do an executive order for everything that he would have done otherwise with the legislation, which is like a baby brain take.
That is not a baby brain take. I said, what could you do from the power of your desk?
You seem to suggest that the president can do whatever they want with it.
Have you watched Donald Trump's presidency, my guy? Does it look like it's rained?
I mean, even Trump couldn't really do whatever he wanted. There was a Matt Gaetz nomination that went awry. There's a reason he's being called Taco Trump. But I mean, he does have a special hold on the Republican Party. That doesn't mean it's an infinite hold on the Republican Party, but he does have a stronger hold on the Republican Party, and the fear of retaliation from Trump, I think, is much more substantial than it was from Biden. And I do think that, while a party should respect its leader, I do think, and this might sound bad, but there should be some fear of what leadership can do if you undermine the agenda when we have such a short time window. Whether that be deleting resources for your next campaign, whether that be supporting a primary opponent, whether that be tabling one of your signature policy items that you're trying to get through the House to serve your district. I mean, there can be all sorts of tactics, but there should be some amount of fear of retaliation, and Trump is nothing but that fear.
Check him on executive orders.
Circling the drain.
I already told you I agree with stacking the court, Hutch. I already told you that.
That's not even on that's a separate conversation.
We're continuing the circle. It's an infinite circle at this point. Can I propose a slight change of topic? Because we talked about this. I was just going to say we've talked about this. One interesting topic to kind of tie into is right now, this is kind of a historical debate. What should Biden have done? But right now, okay, this is an interesting question. We've got this big kerfuffle with the Epstein files, okay? And there's a question, what should Democrats do with this controversy today? And what should they do if they capture a House in Congress in 2026?
Say that they should be transparent, that Trump's acting incredibly suspicious, and then once they get in the House, release whatever they can without jeopardizing the victims. Whoever's in it is whoever's in it. If it's a Democrat, it's a Republican, and it is what it is. If it's an absolute nothing burger, then it's an absolute nothing burger. But I find it hard to believe that we can somehow fuck up the rollout more than Pam Bondi did, or the metadata showing that the footage was edited after they said they would be raw, or the fact that there was footage missing, or the fact that the story keeps changing, or the fact that they just keep saying like, hey, you know, actually it's fake now, and the flip-flopping, like I don't think it'd be hard to not mess it up that bad.
I think that's that's the flavor of the week, guys. That's what's going on right now.
It is the flavor of the week, and I think it actually does relate to what we were just talking about, because in the modern era now, and like when we're not out of power, I am so pissed off at the people who are being pussies. I'm just so pissed off at the people who aren't fighters. I'm going to be honest with you in terms of like the messaging on this, on Mamdani, like the fact that we have conservative or I don't know, centrist Democrats or whatever you want to call them coming out and not supporting the nominee in New York pisses me the off. So I think that we should absolutely wield the bully pulpit on issues like Epstein, on issues like everything that Trump is doing, and I don't like the current leadership is failing us on that front. The era of Kristen Sinema's has to be over. You can maybe make the case, and I would make the case actually that the conditions in 2021 were difficult for Biden. They were really difficult. He did not make the most of it. I agree, but they were genuinely difficult. But now we can't go back to that era where we're fighting for mansions and cinemas, and we need to primary the out of people like Fetterman, out of all, and I don't care if they're really in these, Uber whatever districts. People like Glusenkamp Perez, I don't like them at all. If you are giving Trump like all of these signaling victories and you're like condemning like Al Green when he stands up for Medicaid and all that shit, that pisses me the off. And so whatever you want to say, we can relitigate for the rest of time Biden's failures and the system that existed in 2021. But I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to where we're having to rely on the mansions of the world. And so at the very least, when it comes to Epstein, when it comes to all this stuff, I want fighters. I want people who are stronger so we don't end up back in that unfortunate situation that we can't,
Woof. Okay. So yeah, I still don't believe that Manchin could have been pressured. Or I think it's incredibly unlikely. In the way that's being described due to just how the majority is. I do agree that Biden should have messaged better, that his messaging was pretty piss poor when he was in there, that he doesn't have the media knowledge of some other in the party, and I think that he didn't make himself publicly available enough, he wasn't aggressive enough, and he didn't touch on the issues that are easy W's for Democrats when it comes to the stuff that we propose and that are popular, for example, like a public option, expanding healthcare. The fact that Trump is decreasing the amount of people who are covered by health insurance during his term is something that's a huge political loser. When Joe Biden's proposal was to make a public option to continue to expand the amount of people on health coverage. That's an easy winner. I never heard about it when he was in office. Never. That was always a big issue for me. It's a big issue for a lot of people. And I mean, it was even one of the impetuses of Bernie's rise back in 2015, 2016, nothing. And so there's a question of exactly how much Biden did not utilize the information age. So I would agree with that. Man, I never seen Jessiah get so heated though. I never seen him get so heated.